Okay, I am live. This is Josh Banks. I am the author of the book Jesus, Others, You, the Self-Centered Gospel. It's this one right here, Jesus, Others, You, the Self-Centered Gospel. Pick up a copy of it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on my author page from Facebook, author Joshua Banks. And new special announcement, I am now officially an author with Westbow Press, which is a division of Zondervan. So you can pick up the book on their website as well, westbowpress.com, and look up the book Jesus, Others, You, the Self-Centered Gospel. I'm just chilling today and sitting on this bench right here. It's a wooden bench. And so we're going to call today's little session Thoughts from the Bench. So recently I was asked a question by somebody about why did Jesus talk in parables? One of the things you see about Jesus all throughout the Bible is that he was talking in parables a lot. And so the question would be, why was he always talking in parables? Now, I've heard this explained that what Jesus was doing was that he was taking a complex subject and he was simplifying it so that it was easy to understand for people. And that sounds good, but it's not true. Jesus was not attempting to take complex things and simplify them for people. I'm going to read a scripture to you real quick. Matthew 13, I'm starting 35. And it says, we're starting 34. It says, all these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. And apart from a parable, he wasn't speaking to them. So verse 34 tells us that Jesus would no longer speak to crowds of people unless it was in a parable. Verse 35 says, in order to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. Verse 36 says, then he sent the crowds away and went into the house. His disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds. So the question is, why did Jesus talk to people in parables? I'm going to read one more scripture, and then I'm going to just kind of like go off the top of my head and talk a little bit about this subject. It's Proverbs chapter 25, verse 2. It says, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the glory of kings to search it out. Verse 3 says, as high as heaven and as deep as earth, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable. Why did Jesus talk to people in parables? One of the things, if you ever study the life of Jesus, that he did on a regular basis is he would start out a story with this phrase, he that hath an ear, let him hear. And the reason why he would open with that statement is because Jesus understood something. Everybody does not have an ear to hear what you have to say. Now let's put this all in context. Jesus, in his time, was doing some crazy things that nobody had ever seen, believed, experienced. People were blind and Jesus would show up and he'd heal their eyes. People were hungry and then Jesus would show up and feed the masses. People were sick, people were lame, and Jesus would come and make what seemed to be impossible situations possible. And so people would follow him. I mean, think about it. Jesus is literally handing out winning lottery tickets left and right. Kind of like Oprah. You got a car, and you got a car, and you got a car. Like, Jesus is hooking people up with stuff they never thought possible. And so whenever you have that kind of a situation, needless to say, you'll have large crowds following you. But whenever you have large crowds following you, most of the people in those large crowds are following you because you're handing out winning lottery tickets. They're following you because what they can get from you. And if you look at your life, there's a lot of people that you might have in your life, and most of them are in your life for what they can get from you. They're in your life because of what you do for them at that moment. You say things that make them feel good, or maybe you're the life of the party and they like to laugh, and so they hang around you because you laugh. Or maybe you're that type of person that every time you go out with people, you'll pay for everything. So they go out with you because they know that they can be broke and not have to pay anything because you'll take care of it. A lot of times people don't really care much about you. They care about what you can do for them. And so when you look at the life of Jesus, he's surrounded by crowds and thousands of people. And most of them didn't care anything about what he was saying. They cared about what he could do for them immediately. They cared about what he was doing for them immediately, or what he could possibly do for them immediately. But whenever he quit giving out lotto tickets, they left. And so Jesus would talk in parables, because what he was doing was he was separating those that were really in the market for truth versus those that were just trying to get something from him. Jesus talked in parables because he was really he was going to throw a net out there. He was going to throw bait out there for those that were really interested in what he had to say versus those that just wanted to get something from him. And so in Matthew 13:36, the disciples come back to him and they ask him, hey, explain to us. And that's one of the things that you'll see with people that really care about you. They'll always want to know what's going on in your head. They're not satisfied with seeing what you do. They're not satisfied with just hanging out with you. They're not just satisfied with being around you because of the benefit associated with being around you. They want to know what makes you tick. They want to know who you are on the inside. And that's a special place, and that's a private place, and that's the type of place that you should reserve for those that are investing in you. You invest in those that invest in you. You invest in those that are invested in you. And there's a principle of reciprocity that happens, that as you sow, you reap. Well, when you're surrounded by people that are just parasites, and they're just there to suck the life out of you, you're not going to reap much from those people, because the benefit that they get is whatever you're giving out at the time. But when you surround yourself with people that are literally invested in you, legitimately invested in you, you can give out of yourself and they can grow from you. And guess what they do? Because they grow from you, they'll give out of themselves and you can grow from them. And it's a relationship that doesn't take away from anyone, but each person is benefited from the relationship. The disciples recognized something about Jesus. They recognized that his words brought life to them. There was a passage when all the people left Jesus, and Jesus asked his disciples, hey, so are y'all going to leave too now? And Peter says, hey, where are we going to go? You're the one that has the words of life. They recognized that when he speaks, when he opens his mouth, man, you better pay attention, because he's going to say something that is going to change your life. And so having said that, the way we apply that, practically is you don't give everything out to everybody. There are some things that you need to keep to yourself. I see certain people and they want to tell everybody their business. They want to tell everybody everything that's going on. And people hang out with them because it's entertaining. It's entertaining to hear them talk about how jacked up their lives are. And in some regards, it kind of makes you feel better about yourself. She's like, man, I don't got it that bad. But that's not how you're supposed to be. You need to reserve certain things for those that really care about you. Because those people aren't just in it to take from you. Those people are invested in you and they want to see your success. And many times we don't see successes because we don't surround ourselves with people that are legitimately interested in our success. They're just there because of what they can get. But I think you'll find that the more you surround yourself with people that are invested in your own success, the more those people will pull things out of you that will push you towards your goal. The more those people will say things to you that will push you towards your goal. The more those people will encourage you to do things that will help you get to your goal. So why did Jesus talk in parables? Jesus talked in parables to separate those that cared about what he had to say from those that just wanted to benefit from what he was doing for them. He did talk about that, but in context, look at what Jesus talked about many times. He would always encourage people to believe. He would always encourage people to believe. Jesus would tell people, don't doubt, believe. And I think the issue is that those, go back to what Jesus said, he that hath an ear, let him hear. Those that were in the market for truth would do just that. They would believe. But you look at how many times the crowds would leave Jesus. And they would leave him angry, they would leave him upset, they would leave him disappointed. How many times did that happen to him? How many times did the crowds turn their back on Jesus? And what that does is it identifies there was a separation between those that were legitimately interested in Jesus because they believed what he had to say, and those that really weren't interested in Jesus. He was just the popular thing at the time. And what separated those two groups of people are those that pursued what Jesus had to say. There were groups of people that didn't care nothing about what Jesus had to say. They were just there for the free food. They were just there because that's where everybody else was hanging out. They were just there because it was popular. But you look at the disciples and you look at people like Nicodemus, who may have heard Jesus speaking in a public setting, but then came to him privately. There was something that separated him from the crowd. Maybe he was even ashamed of it. He didn't want to do it in front of everybody, but there was something about what Jesus said that separated him from the crowds. And he came to Jesus and said, hey, look, explain this to me. I'm confused. I don't understand. And Jesus talked to him. Jesus opened things up to him. And I think that's something that we have to do, or something that we should do in our own lives, is not be so invested with the crowds of people that tend to seem interested in what we're saying or what we're doing. You don't dismiss them. Jesus fed the crowds. Jesus did all kinds of wonderful things. Jesus taught the crowds. The Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus taught the crowds. But he invested in his disciples. He called his disciples, you're my friends, so I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what's on my mind. I'm going to explain things to you. And one of the beautiful things I think that gets overlooked is the value of authentic relationship. And that's something that we need to put a higher priority on, because especially in a world where Facebook is the most popular thing, and it's easier to be involved in relationships that really require little to no effort from us. One of the things that this whole Why Did Jesus Talk in Parables kind of teaches us is the value of relationships, the value of intimate relationships. We need to have people in our lives that can talk to us and tell us the truth. We need to have people in our lives that are that when I say something and they don't quite understand it, they don't just dismiss it. They actually investigate and they search deeper, because they're invested in the relationship, because they realize what this relationship does for them, and it helps them grow and they benefit from it. So there is a value to legitimate, authentic relationships. There is a value to those people that are legitimately interested in the truth of who you are, and truth in general. And there is a separation from the general public and those people that are invested in truth, invested in you, invested in your purpose, and really ultimately called to be by your side. Because everybody that comes in your life isn't going to be there forever. And sometimes what separates the crowds is our own struggles and our own turmoils and our own things that we go through, that we start to learn who it is that's really with us and who it is that's really not with us. Didn't want to hear or unable to hear. I think it's a little bit of both. Jesus was real clear that he had things to say to people, but they weren't yet ready to hear. I think it's definitely a little bit of both, in that there were some that were just unable to hear things, and I get that, and I think that could go into a whole nother conversation. But as a general rule, one thing we see that's very prevalent in society and in the world is that people hear what they want to hear. You have a conversation with somebody or a group of people, and you take those group of people and you ask them, okay, now what was that conversation about? And different people will have a different report about what the conversation was about, because people hear what they want to hear. And so you have to ask yourself as an individual, I have to ask myself as an individual, am I interested in entertainment, or am I interested in truth? And it's not that being entertained is wrong. It's not. It's great. It's fine. But there comes a place where I have to ask myself, am I interested in truth to the degree that I'm willing to hear it from a source that I might not necessarily agree with? Am I invested in truth to the degree that when it comes across my path, I can recognize it? And sometimes based on where you're at, you can't see things. There are certain things that were told to me 10 years ago that it just passed right by me based on where I was at in that season. But then I turn around and look at it now, and it's like, wow, that was truth, and it was right in front of my face. But just speaking specifically about that specific time, and I think it applies even today, is that there are still things that when you look at what Jesus said, some people get it and some people don't. And like I said, there could be a number of reasons why that is. But definitely one of those reasons is as it related to him and his time at that particular time, certain people just didn't want to. They weren't interested in what he had to say. They were interested in what he could do. They were interested in what they could get from him. And I don't want to go too much into the history and the culture, but the people a lot of times were broke and they were poor. A lot of times they were sick, and there was a lot, medicine wasn't what it was today. There were a lot of things that were set up in such a way that if you found out that somebody was healing folks and there wasn't a cure to your situation, you showed up. And that doesn't make that wrong, but sometimes it does identify our intentions. Especially as it related to Jesus back then, where there were those that were saying, "Hey, look, this is the Messiah. Hey, this is the answer." And some people really connected to that message and committed themselves to that, but others didn't. I mean, think of it. Jesus preached, and the Bible talks about the crowds of 5,000 plus people. And that was just counting the men. That wasn't counting the women or the children. And so, you estimate 10,000 people that are there when Jesus is talking, but then when it comes time to look at the upper room where the disciples are actually waiting for the coming of the Holy Spirit, how many people were there? There was 120. What happened to the other 10,000 people? Where'd they all go? And more likely than not, those people saw Jesus die and thought that the message was done. They thought that the show was over, and so they left. But those were the people that weren't invested in him, because the people that were invested in him knew what he said. And it's crazy because he even told the crowds, look, I'm going to tear down the temple and I'm going to rebuild it in 3 days. So people hear what they want to hear sometimes. And I think that's a part of it. So what does that do to us, and what kind of responsibility does that put on us? It puts a responsibility on us to be invested in truth. I want to know truth because I feel that truth is important to my life, and I don't want to live a lie. I don't want to live in a lie. And I need to be more invested. I need to be invested in the truth to the degree that I'm not just committed to a surface level understanding of anything, especially as it relates to myself, especially as it relates to the relationships I'm in, and especially as it relates to my relationship with God. I don't want it to be just a surface level thing. I want it to be something that's deep. Proverbs says it is the wisdom of God to conceal a thing. It's the wisdom of kings to search that thing out. And so am I committed to searching a thing out that might seem to be hidden or might seem to be mysterious or whatever. But anyways, it's just me sitting here and thinking. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate your questions, because it definitely made this a lot more fun for me. Again, post, share. I'm going to post this on my author page so other folks can see it. And last shameless plug. Jesus, Others, You, the Self-Centered Gospel. It's available on Amazon.com. Author Joshua Banks on Facebook. You can get it there. You can get it through Westbow Press, which is a company of Zondervan. It's out there. Go get it. Buy it. Tell me what you think about it. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you tuning in. And whatever comments you have or whatever you guys think about the post after I post it on Facebook, go ahead and write it down. And even if you don't agree with me, throw it out there. And let's have that conversation. All right, talk to you. Bye.